If we get this thing going, it's the perfect weather to take the top off. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. I have impeccable timing as always, and we waited to dive into the Freelander until after we got a foot of snow. This is our beloved 3-door Freelander, quite possibly the best of any Land Rover. Some might say the king of Land Rovers. And this particular one has the not very good 2.5 liter KV6 engine. We attempted to drive this thing across the country with 12 other Land Rovers. This one, unfortunately, was the only one that didn't make that trek. And it doesn't appear to be getting any better. But let's get this block of ice inside and thawed out so we can figure out exactly what went wrong. Hopefully it starts. I'm just kidding. It starts. I literally just moved it here so I could plow snow. All right, the first thing we're gonna do is pressure test the cooling system. It's obviously leaking. You know, as they say, it's a little more than AC condensation. And pulled over on the side of the road. That looks like a tad bit more than AC condensation. Luckily, I got some Land Rover friends with me. From our little cursory look when we were on the Roverball in Ohio, I'm probably not gonna be able to see exactly where this guy is leaking. It's a mess down here with what they got going on with the belt drive and everything. It's all buried, but I am curious to see how much of a leak we have. I also forgot that we went as far as pulling timing covers off when we were looking at it in Ohio. Undisclosed location in Ohio, and I think the Freelander has finally died. We are calling it on this one. Guess I dug in further than I thought. The keen eyes probably notice this is a different color cap now. Usually seals better if you put the right one on. That's definitely not a third color adapter. They really should make these pumps a little bit bigger though. It's a lot of work. All right, we're at 15 PSI. We'll let it sit for a minute, see how much it drops. And surprisingly, my JB Weld job is still holding up. That's got 1,500 miles on it. We didn't even get a chance to put the new one in. We did bring it along though. And while we have that sitting, we'll just start taking some of the stuff that is in the way and get it out of the way. If there is one thing that I kind of dislike in the automotive world, it is air filter housings that are combined with the engine cover. I just don't like having to remove the air filter to get down and diagnose something. You know, sometimes you want to be able to see the actual engine and some of the things while it's running, and it's usually nice to do that with the filter attached. We're dropping, but it is dropping very, very slowly. I'm guessing this is going to be a leak that rears its head while warm. I don't remember spilling oil while filling the Freelander up, but I'm not exactly sure that could come from any other direction. Unless our PCV stuff is leaking, but you'd think you'd see it down there for that, so probably from me spilling. So of course, once we have it back in Iowa, it's not gonna be showing a massive leak like it was on the road. So I guess it's time to dive into this guy and see what we can find. It was obviously leaking a fair amount. So once we open it up and come across it, we'll be able to see where it's at, more than likely. While we get stuff out of the way, I'm gonna try and keep the cooling system intact and all the hoses connected. That way, once we have some stuff cleared out of the way, we can re-pressure test it. Ooh, I just heard it. Can you guys hear that? That is so strange. It's been hooked up for about 20 minutes, holding pressure. Now all of a sudden it just started leaking. And that noise is not coming from the water pump like I suspected. Interesting. So I think a fair number of you have come to the channel since the last time we dove into the Freelander. So you new guys get to see what is possibly the worst engineered engine I've ever touched. It's a mess in here, and it only gets messier the further we go in. But if it's not the water pump leaking, we just had a major win. Wait till you see what's under there. If you've never seen one of these guys apart, you're in for a real treat. That is the thermostat tucked nicely under the intake manifold. Good place for it. The massive amount of hate that the Freelander gets is primarily because of this V6 engine. We never got the 4-cylinder diesel in the US. If we would have, there would likely be a slightly different opinion on these guys. I'm not saying it would be great, but I am telling you it would be better than what it is. We got the automatic V6. And on top of being a V6, it is a transverse mounted V6, which in my opinion is the worst thing invented since sliced bread. So in transverse V6 fashion, we have to remove the intake manifold to do anything, which means we have to remove the mess of aged plastic vacuum lines that have never needed to be repaired. What's funny about this thing though is, as much as I just complained about everything going on here, I really do love this guy. When I say I love this guy, I'm really not joking. And I'm starting to get pretty good at taking it apart. Not something to be happy about, but I guess it's better to be good at taking this apart than to be not good at it and still have to take it apart as many times as I have. See, I did all that complaining and we already almost have the intake manifold off. I'm just a bit of a complainer. There we go. There we go. So the coolant sitting down in the valley is a little suspect. The only thing that has me a little perplexed about that is when we were on the side of the highway and it was leaking coolant, out of the passenger side here. And pulled over on the side of the road. And then when we were in Craig's shop, it looked like it was coming out of the timing covers.
Coolant dripping out of the lower timing cover.
Which is why I originally thought water pump. But obviously when we pressure tested it, we had pressure leaking from this thermostat water outlet conglomeration. So that would make the most sense. The only problem there is, if we look at the valley, you can see there is a big ridge wall at the front of the valley. It would have to fill most of this valley up for it to start leaking. I mean, it's possible, and you can kind of see it's wet behind there, but I think we might be dealing with a couple of problems here. So we saw this, what I thought was oil there. If we look, we also have it there, which is a very odd place to have oil. And if we peek back there, we're wet with what appears to be oil, but I guess it could be coolant. But this doesn't really have the consistency of oil. It's looking more like the power steering fluid. And this area looks a little suspect. So if you look down here on the side of the pump, this little valley below the alternator is filled with power steering fluid. So, thinking we got a couple things going on here. I know it's hard to believe that the Freelander has more than one issue going on at a time. Crazy, I know. So when we were trying to diagnose this in haste at Craig's shop, I think what we were probably seeing coming out of the cover is power steering fluid mixed with the fact that there was just a bunch of coolant all over, which is good in a way. I'm thinking we're probably fine on the water pump, and our coolant leak was coming from our thermostat water outlet spider. I mean, just look at this thing right here. This pipe feeds into the back of the water pump and goes into the thermostat housing, which fits down into the block, which is attached to this other water outlet, which also fits down into the block. And then we have 3 outlets, 2 for the thermostat, 1 for that water outlet, going into radiator hoses, which go to somewhere over here. I mean, look at this. On the power steering side of things, we're gonna have to wait until we get this all back together, fired up. This guy appears to have had someone stick a hose over top the hose to protect it from the belts. So I wouldn't doubt if there's something going on underneath there. Doesn't look like we're leaking at the banjo fitting, but on the coolant side of things, I'd like to pressure test it again while we have this guy opened up so we can actually get a pinpoint on where it's leaking without everything in the way. The only problem is we have 3 coolant ports open, 1 off this hose, so that's easy enough to cap off. But then on the cylinder head, we have a port right there and 1 on the other side. So we'll have to fashion something up to block those off. I mean, the good news is 15 PSI isn't gonna be too much to jerry rig something to hold. Worst case scenario, we make a little flat plate that bolts off these 2 bolt holes and sandwiches some gasket material there. But I think we can probably come up with some sort of plug, maybe with some tape, and ram that in there. Do we also have to block off this one? Looks like we might also have to block off that. We may have 4 plugs to do. All right, we got quite the professional setup going on here. We got a bolt in this line. We have an assortment of plugs on the ports and the cylinder head. So we'll get this guy pumped up. Hopefully those hold. My confidence level is at about 12%. And I can already see where we're leaking. We're at 5 PSI in the system. I can already hear it hissing. We'll move the mic down so you guys can hear it as well. That knock sensor's in the way of seeing it a little bit. All right, so look at the top side of this guy, in between this knock sensor wire and the housing. You can see it bubbling right along the rim there. Mind you, this was all replaced about 2,000 miles before it failed. That's less than ideal, but I will say I am super happy that it is that water outlet leaking and not the water pump, because the water pump would have required removing what is quite possibly the worst designed engine mount I've ever seen. If you guys don't remember, this is just something. So for the water pump is timing belt driven, so we would have to pull all the front off again, which is the way a lot of stuff is anymore. But this mess of an engine mount is quite possibly the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And not only do you have to remove that for the timing belt, a simple serpentine belt change requires the removal of that. We have an engine mount right there going to the chassis, which goes to this bracket, which has another wishbone engine mount right here on top, which has a second wishbone engine mount that goes to the strut tower. So we have 3 mounts attached together in the same exact area. I have no idea what they are trying to accomplish here. I understand we have a standard engine mount for the vertical weight-bearing load. Then we have a wishbone style torque arm to control the lateral or front to back movement. That makes sense to me, but what doesn't make sense to me is, why do we have 2 of those tied together? Why couldn't we just have one single mount going from this bracket to that? We could have just literally extended this out to here. There's zero need to complicate that. But back to the worst part of this is, say you throw a serpentine belt on a road trip. Not a big deal, go to the parts store, grab a new one. Big deal. We have to jack the engine up, remove this entire mess, which without small hands like myself is quite the task. I just don't understand. There's just ways to design things that don't require the amount of effort that this does. So this is the problem with having someone engineer something that has never actually touched a vehicle. I feel that this was like someone's high school project or just fresh out of engineering school. There was zero forethought on like future repairs on this entire engine. I mean, we have cylinder liners that are just held in by the cylinder head, nothing else. The whole thing just doesn't make sense. But with all that said, I'm just happy that the water pump's not the leak. And even though the thermostat is not the easiest thing to replace in the Freelander, it is much easier than that, especially since it's fresh in the memory. On another note, my electrical tape wrapped around plastic plugs holds pressure better than the factory design. I'm the engineer now. And since I'm so confident in the holding power of my homemade plugs, before we tear that housing off and repair the O-ring, let's put them to the test and see how much pressure they hold. All right, we're at 5 PSI. 9. All right, we got 12 PSI out of it. That is all this guy holds. So my plugs are better. So there's our fancy contraption. All I did was take a standard plastic plug, tapered one just like that, and wrapped about 10 loops of electrical tape around it. Solid. All right, so now that we're done messing around, we'll get down to seeing what happened to that O-ring. All right, we got kind of an odd looking failure on the O-ring. Now this could be a rare occurrence of a Joe failure. I've never messed up once in my life. This could be the first time. And I guess we could have possibly nicked the O-ring on the install, although the port in the block has a chamfered edge. So I just don't see that happening right there. Plus, it's also kind of looking odd for an O-ring cut. I'm gonna get some shots with the iPhone to get you a little better close-up look, but it's like half separated on the inside of the O-ring, not where it would have been pinched if we did. And then you can also see in the plastic housing itself, it's got like a deformation where it looks like it almost like steam ported past the O-ring. So I don't know if the O-ring was compromised and it like steam ported some antifreeze past it and then actually melted the plastic. I don't know, it's awful hard to see on camera, but right there you can kind of see the discoloration. That's actually a divot. It almost looks like that got super hot right there. That's an interesting one. Like I said, this was a brand new part just a couple thousand miles ago. This failed right around 2,000 miles after we had the entire thing apart. If it would have been just your typical O-ring tear, we would have saw it long before we even took off to head to New York. We put around 500 miles on it before we left Iowa. Neither here nor there, it doesn't matter. It didn't make it across the country, and now we're gonna fix it again. We'll get this O-ring off of there. Interesting. I mean, I'm guessing I probably messed it up going in, but whatever. All right, let's see if we got something that works. This one looks close. Otherwise, we'll have to run into town. That actually looks like the ticket. We'll lube it up and we'll snap it back into the hose. Get the electrical bits out of the way. Or keep a good eye on that side. I just don't think I did, but... And we're in. We're gonna bolt this guy back down. And we're gonna pressure test it again to make sure everything else is sealed up. And that just wasn't the weakest link in the chain. No bubbling down there anymore. Isn't life comical? All that for like a 10-cent O-ring. We ended up driving an NAS Defender 90 across the country because of this guy. And I think for memory's sake, we will stick this guy right next to the Moab trailer wheel on the wall here in the office. All right, so we're gonna slide this guy all back together. It's a little cumbersome without undoing the fuel rail. So the cooling system is all closed back up. So one final pressure test and we'll let it sit for 15 minutes and make sure we have everything buttoned up. It's pumping up the quickest it has yet. This is the exact reason why we retest it after we fix the leak we found. I'm not sure if you can hear it on camera, but we have a leak on this line running from the expansion tank over to the radiator. By the residue, it looks like it was a minor leak. That's been going on for a little bit. Well, we'll get that one taken care of too. I should probably see if I can find an OEM new one of those guys anyways, because this thing has been cobbled. And that's the real problem with a lot of these older Land Rovers and European vehicles in general, is at a certain point, they get into the hands of people who probably shouldn't have them or don't know enough or don't have the right shops working on them, and they just kind of get treated very poorly. So Ted and I had a service shop for 15 some odd years, and this is something that we saw a lot in the older vehicles, is people were taking them to the wrong mechanics, and you got a bunch of stuff like this cobbled stuff. I should have addressed that before the Roverball, but we were kind of out of time to get anything here. So now that we have a little more time, I'll source the right parts. And if we can't source one of those, I'll build a nicer setup than what we have going on here. We got some hardware store plumbing fittings, what appears to be a steel brake line here. So we'll just do something a little bit nicer, and we are holding pressure. I suppose now would be as good a time as any to finally put that new expansion tank that we've been hanging on to for a few months in the Freelander in Ohio. You know, we like to store our parts a few hundred miles away. I mean, even though my nice JB Weld job held up, that one looks a little nicer. Sure is kind of a goofy mounting design. I mean, it works, it's still goofy. It just kind of slots into the top of the strut. Then we got a little push pin retainer on the back side. Ooh, we should probably do that. Fuel line might help. That would have been a mess. It's gonna be the moment of truth on to whether the Freelander is actually good to go. My Freelander luck would be a massive puddle pouring out the bottom. Don't you think, Chet? If we get this thing going, it's the perfect weather to take the top off. It's only -10. Yes, that's -10 in Fahrenheit, which is like negative a lot in Celsius. Good news is we popped up a new heater just in time so our pipes wouldn't freeze. If it wasn't for me doing stuff last minute, I don't think I'd do anything at all. They used to call me No Funnel Joe. We're either filling up the cooling system or filling up the valley. Yet to be determined. charge the battery too. We're gonna pop that air cleaner back on. This thing truly just needs all new hose clamps and hoses. It's kind of wore out. I mean, let's be honest, if you get a Freelander to 125,000 miles, it's probably been apart a time or two. So we're gonna let this guy get up to temp, make sure the coolant's topped off, and then for the first time in 6 months since we went on the Roverball, we get to take our favorite Land Rover for a spin. And we got the Freelander back together just in time for Christmas. I mean, what better than a 50-mile trip to go pick up a Christmas tree? And tell me the 3-door Freelander is not the single best Land Rover made. I mean, just look at how useful that is. A little brisk, top off, 20-degree cruise, and with that top off, we can haul pretty much anything. So the first real drive in nearly 6 months is complete. We just did 50 miles to do a little Christmas tree shopping. We were just gonna take the Eco, throw the tree on top like you do, but I figured with us needing to take a test drive and this cool removable top, there was nothing better to take, and it reminded me just how much joy that the little Freelander gives me every time I'm in it. I enjoy pretty much all my Land Rovers, but none of them give me the joy. Pretty much a permanent smile on my face anytime I'm in this thing. It's just so quirky and neat, and the fact that it's hated as much as it is makes me love it even more. There's one thing I don't love. Our little chip is starting to spread, and I really do not want to put a new glass in this thing. I'm afraid with this chip, if we use the heater grid, we're gonna have a big issue. So back in the shop we go, but not because of anything underneath the hood. Like I said, we did 50 miles. The Freelander ran flawlessly. Coolant stayed exactly where it needed to be. The valley looks like it's not taking on any more coolant. Kind of comical at this point that we ended our Roverball run because of a simple O-ring. I probably could have fixed it at this point, but I was mistaken when we were there and thought it was the water pump because of where it was coming out. And if it was the water pump, I wouldn't have wanted to had to fix it at Craig's. I would have wanted to do that here because that's kind of an undertaking. But no, we are in the shop because we're gonna try one of these cheap windshield repair kits. I've never used one before, so this will be a new experience. I'm not expecting great results. I just checked with SafeLight and they want $150 to fix a chip. Back when we had the dealership, we were getting chips repaired for $20 to $30. So $150 was just a little shocking to me. So here we are. We're gonna let the windshield warm up with our new heater. But as you can see, we have some more random stuff in here. While we warm that up, let's catch you up on a few of the random things that have been going on in the shop. A little bit of the non-Rover stuff that you guys are always asking about. And we'll start off with the first actual part we were able to make with that CNC press brake that we got 6 months ago. We ordered that when we were in New Jersey the night before we started the Roverball, and we just now, like the Freelander, got something that is functional. We had some family that had a truck that needed some rust repair on the frame, so we were able to cut that out and bend up some cool, nice CNC bent plates for the bottom of that. Then we also went ahead and did a nice little leak down test on the Maserati engine. If you don't know what a leak down test is, it's kind of like a more advanced compression test. What you do is you have a gauge, well actually you have 2 gauges, and then you throw compressed air into the cylinder as it's at top dead center. Say you set the input at 100 PSI, the second gauge will show you what it is holding. In the case of the Maserati, it held between 99 and 97%, so we had 1 to 3% leakage, which is phenomenal. Usually you're safe to about 10% leakage for a healthy engine. But the neat thing about a leak down test is it gives you a true look at the health of an engine. If you have major leakage, say it's down to 20 PSI, so you're leaking 80% out of it, you will be able to hear where it is leaking. So if it is coming back through the throttle body, you have an intake valve not holding compression. If it's coming out the exhaust, you have an exhaust valve not holding compression. And if it is coming through, say, the dipstick or the oil cap, you have the compression going past the piston rings. Luckily, the Maserati engine was healthy, which is good. So we're gonna be way up on that Quattroporte that we just threw away. And speaking of throwing away things, we also tore down our little BMW convertible that we had. It's nice, we're getting stuff cleared out of the back. Like I said, if it's not a Rover, we don't have time for it. So we tore that down, threw it away, another soup can. And there's nothing more comical than showing up to the scrapyard with your Range Rover, throwing away BMWs and Maseratis. I get a kick out of it. Before our first big snowfall of the year, we also got a little bit of the shop sorted out back. Not as much as I would have liked to. I wanted to park more cars out back, but we did pull the P38 into a better position so we could kind of plow around it. The P38 has pretty much done all its miles under my ownership, being pulled by something else, as P38s do. We also cleaned out the back of the X-Mod Defender. I wanted to kind of do an inventory of what we received with the car, which it looks like we have pretty much everything besides an engine and transmission. I wanted to get that out of the back of it because the top is not the most weather tight, so I didn't want everything sitting buried in snow over the winter. And speaking of good winter projects, we had to fix a lower unit for a boat. Well, we didn't have to, we chose to. We have some buddies who have a boat shop, so we get to do some neat stuff like that every once in a while. These are kind of fun to do. I like the challenge of kind of making a template and getting it to look like that chunk wasn't knocked off. We made our little piece, TIG welded it in, blended it all smooth. Hopefully it looks good with paint. I'm not a body guy, so I didn't paint it. And I kind of forgot on the Maserati engine, they have a really goofy spark plug. It's a really, really small spark plug with a very small diameter spark plug tube. So we actually had to modify some of the compression tester to get it to fit down in there. That's the first one of those I've ever had to do. We've We've leak down tested a ton of vehicles. This is the first one we've had to modify the fitting. Luckily, we have the lathe. If you don't have a little lathe, a little manual lathe comes in so much handy around the shop. This would have been quite a big ordeal had we not had that. We just chucked it up, turned it down, and fit it right in there. And just more stuff around the car wash. We're obviously doing the garage doors. We need to get that side, the machine shop side, weather tight. We have our new heater in on the shop side, and where our shirts are here, we're gonna cut another door in. Just like the one that goes from the office to the shop, we're gonna have one that goes from the office to the machine shop. So once the garage doors are in and everything's sealed up, we'll do that, and then we'll figure out how to get heat from in here over to there, because I'd really like to just keep 2 heaters going. I don't think we need 3 hanging heaters. I think that's a little overkill for an 1,800 square foot building. Realistically, if this was an open building, we would be able to heat it with just one of those heaters, but the cinder block walls separating everything out kind of throw a wrench into that. But I'm kind of thinking of some ductwork and fans that we can pump some of this air in over there, because realistically that heater is far too big for the office space. So we actually run into issues with that end as well, because it kind of short cycles and that's really not good for them. So I'd like to kind of distribute some of this heat over to the machine shop side, and we'll be all good on that front. But during that, we also sealed up the front door to the office. Everything has just been kind of a little bit neglected. This place was built in 1995. I don't think it was touched much since 1995. There's not much we have to do, but just little knick-knacky things, and it holds heat much better. Although it is a cinder block building, it's not going to hold heat great. But so far so good. We got down to -10 and everything kept up fine. I haven't got my first gas bill yet, so I'll cry then, I'm sure. And since it's snowing out, snowmobile. You know what snowmobiles are good at? They're good at being broken. It's not mine, another family member. It's got, as you can see, a leak. The heat exchanger is leaking underneath the track, so we're gonna try and flip it over, see if we can weld that up and save quite a bit of headache of having to deal with that. But that kind of brings you up to date on some of the back end stuff. There's obviously a lot more. We'll keep sprinkling some of that stuff in either on their own videos or on the back side of some of the other videos. But I think we are warm enough now that we can attempt to be a professional windshield repair guy. Now, I don't hold a whole lot of high expectations for this thing to actually work, but all we do, I guess, is push down our little thing, center it over the chip. We're gonna screw this guy in, which has a little rubber end, and get that pressed up against the glass, but I guess we should probably make sure we don't press it a ton and make the crack worse. Then we're gonna put a couple drops of the resin inside there. And then they got this little plunger that is gonna act as the pressure providing device. So we're gonna screw that in, and that's gonna force the resin down into the chip, and it's just gonna work. So I guess my mic died, but all we're doing here is squeezing the resin down into the chip with a little screw knob dealy. Here I am checking the backside to make sure it's pushing through all the cracks, and it actually is filling in nicely. There it is, pulling it off, a little extra resin falling. Then we dab some more resin in, and then we just stick our little carrying sheet on, and then all you got to do is stick it out underneath the sun. There's a problem with that though. I guess it's a good thing we have a couple lizards at home and we can use their heat lamp. Hopefully they don't get too cold while we're borrowing it. We're gonna pull this guy off, shut it off, peel our strip off, and tell you the truth, that seems acceptable. Get this all cleaned up. You know what? I can't even be mad at that. The chip's obviously visible. That was never gonna go away, but it actually did a good job filling in our little spider cracks. For a $14 kit, I think it's gonna do its job. I don't really care about the chip itself, but at this point in time, I just don't want it to scatter across the windshield, especially with the temp swings we're gonna have. These Freelander windshields are quite fragile, almost like they're made of glass. I've missed this thing. I think it's gonna be our daily for the next little bit. I'm thinking we'll dive into what's going on with this guy in the next video. With that being said, appreciate you guys watching, appreciate all the comments, and looking forward to this guy, but even more than Discovery 1s, looking forward to finally driving the Freelander.